Welcome to this video. Have you ever scrolled through an endless cascade of images, news feeds, and updates, only to feel a profound sense of disconnection, a quiet hollowness settling in your chest? Does the relentless pace of modern life leave you feeling paradoxically empty? Like a spectator watching your own existence unfold from a distance? It is a strange affliction of our times, this feeling of being functionally operational, yet fundamentally numb. Breathing but not truly inhaling the air of life. We exist, we perform our duties, we consume, we connect digitally across vast distances. Yet the feeling persists that genuine, vibrant life remains elusive, just beyond our grasp. It is as though we are caught in a vast, intricate machine, perfectly integrated, yet losing the spark of individual spirit. If this sense of unease, this quiet desperation beneath the surface of busyness, resonates with you, then perhaps a voice from the past can offer not easy answers, but profound questions and a challenging path forward. Søren Kierkegaard, a 19th-century Danish thinker known for his intensity, his wit, and his relentless focus on the individual's struggle for meaning. He confronted a world he saw as increasingly losing its vitality, its capacity for passion and authentic selfhood. He diagnosed the spiritual malaise of his era, an era grappling with emerging modernity, in ways that echo disturbingly in our own hyper-connected, yet often isolating century. This video is an invitation to explore Kierkegaard's thought, not merely as historical philosophy, but as a living challenge. We will investigate his critique of the dead world and his radical, demanding vision for how to become fully, subjectively, passionately alive within it. Prepare yourself, for Kierkegaard offers no comfortable solutions. He demands courage, the willingness to choose, and the fortitude to face the unsettling core of human existence. Let us embark on this journey to understand what it truly means to live. Kierkegaard observed his society, the burgeoning modernity of Copenhagen, and saw a creeping sickness, the erosion of the individual spirit. He identified a powerful amorphous entity he called the crowd or the public. For Kierkegaard, the crowd was far more than a simple gathering of people. It was a mode of existence, an anonymous force that absolved individuals of personal responsibility and authentic thought. Within the crowd, one need not wrestle with difficult choices or cultivate deep convictions. Instead, one adopts the prevailing opinions, mimics the current fashions, and finds a deceptive security in blending in. The crowd, he argued, acts as a great leveler, smoothing out differences, discouraging eccentricity, and reducing unique persons to interchangeable units. Passionate belief is replaced by fleeting sentiment, deep commitment by shallow enthusiasm. Does this sound hauntingly familiar? Consider the dynamics of social media, the pressure to conform to online norms, the curated personas we project, the algorithmic echo chambers that reinforce our biases, the viral phenomena that demand instant participation or condemnation. Think of how public opinion, often manufactured or amplified, shapes discourse and silences dissenting or complex viewpoints. Kierkegaard saw the crowd as a phantom, an abstraction that offered the illusion of community while preventing true individual self-formation. To dissolve oneself into the crowd is to surrender the difficult task of becoming an I, opting instead for the easier path of being a they. This path offers comfort, the comfort of anonymity and shared irresponsibility. But Kierkegaard warned, it was the chilling comfort of spiritual death. It represented an abdication of the fundamental human task, the task of existing as a unique, responsible self. Closely relating to the problem of the crowd was what Kierkegaard identified as the aesthetic stage of existence. This concept extends beyond art appreciation. It describes a whole way of life organized around the pursuit of pleasure, the avoidance of pain and boredom, and the constant search for interesting experiences. The individual living aesthetically drifts from one sensation to the next, one relationship to another, driven by a deep fear of commitment and monotony. Commitment implies choosing one path and excluding others, accepting limitations, and facing the possibility of suffering. All things the aesthetic seeks to evade. Their life is dominated by possibility rather than actuality. They wish to keep all doors open, forever sampling, never fully investing. Reflect on our contemporary culture. The ceaseless stream of entertainment designed for immediate gratification. The consumerist promise of happiness through the next acquisition. The pervasive fear of missing out that propels us towards endless novelty without deep engagement. The aesthete may appear sophisticated, engaging, even enviable in their freedom. But Kierkegaard saw a profound emptiness beneath this surface. The relentless chase for the interesting eventually leads to its opposite, a deep, pervasive boredom. Not just temporary weariness, but a soul-crushing sense of meaninglessness that arises when life lacks commitment and purpose. The aesthetic life, lived solely for the moment, ultimately reveals its own inherent instability and hollowness. It is a life lived horizontally, skimming the surface, avoiding the vertical dimension of depth, commitment, and meaning. Kierkegaard saw this aesthetic orientation combined with the anonymity fostered by the crowd, creating a society of detached spectators, individuals living ironically, vicariously, or simply distractedly, estranged from the core of their own being. Furthermore, Kierkegaard fiercely opposed the dominant philosophical trends of his day, especially the Hegelian system, which purported to offer a totalizing, objective understanding of reality, history, and the human spirit. He viewed this preoccupation with objective truth found in abstract systems, scientific facts, and grand historical narratives as dangerously disconnected from the concrete, lived reality of the individual subject. What profit is there, he provocatively asked, in understanding the entire cosmos if you lose your own self in the process? How helpful is objective knowledge about humanity in general if it fails to guide you, the singular individual facing your unique life, towards living with passion, meaning, and purpose? Kierkegaard championed the significance of subjective truth. He argued that the most crucial truths, those concerning existence, values, faith, and meaning, are not objective propositions to be passively accepted, but personal realities to be actively grasped, lived, and committed to with passionate inwardness. The critical question shifts from what is universally true to what is true for me. What idea, what conviction am I prepared to live and die for? This radical emphasis on subjectivity cuts against the grain of our modern world, which often prioritizes empirical data, expert opinions, algorithmic recommendations, and societal consensus. We frequently look outwards for validation, for guidance on how to live, what to believe, even who we should be. Kierkegaard would perceive this as another manifestation of escape, another strategy to avoid the awesome and terrifying freedom, the burden of responsibility that comes with forging one's own existence, discovering one's own subjective truth. Relying solely on external, objective frameworks, no matter how sophisticated, risks leading to an impersonal, detached life, where we might know much about the world, but remain strangers to ourselves. These elements, the pervasive influence of the crowd, the allure of the aesthetic life, the dominance of objective thinking, converge to produce what Kierkegaard considered the fundamental human condition, or rather, sickness, despair. In his profound work, The Sickness unto Death, he analyzed despair not merely as melancholy or depression in the psychological sense, but as a spiritual ailment, a fundamental disharmony within the self. Despair, in its essence, is the condition of not being authentically oneself. It manifests primarily in two ways: the despair of weakness, of not willing to be oneself, and the despair of defiance, of willing despairingly to be oneself. The first form involves losing oneself in the finite world, in distractions, in the anonymity of the crowd, refusing to acknowledge or strive towards one's infinite potential, one's unique selfhood, or one's relationship to the transcendent power that constitutes the self, for Kierkegaard, God. Such individuals might be entirely unaware of their despair, comfortably lost in the routines of everyday life, yet fundamentally estranged from their true spiritual core. The second form involves an awareness of one's potential, but a refusal to accept the conditions of existence, perhaps rebelling against finitude, suffering, or dependence, attempting to defiantly create oneself solely on one's own terms, rejecting the power that established the self. This individual feels the despair acutely, but remains trapped in a state of rebellion. Critically, Kierkegaard asserted that despair is nearly universal. It is the default condition in a world that promotes conformity, distraction, and the avoidance of deep self-examination. It is the inherent sickness in being a self tasked with the complex project of relating itself to itself and to the ultimate ground of its being. It is the low hum of anxiety and meaninglessness that often underlies even seemingly successful and happy modern lives. The nagging feeling that something vital is missing. This constitutes Kierkegaard's stark diagnosis: a world increasingly characterized by anonymity, seduced by superficial pleasures, misled by the quest for purely objective certainty, and consequently mired in a pervasive, often hidden state of despair, a world, in crucial respects, spiritually inanimate. Yet Kierkegaard was not simply a diagnostician of cultural decay. His sharp critique serves a vital purpose: to awaken us from our collective slumber, to make us acutely aware of our condition so that we might consciously choose a different, more vital path. How then do we transition from this state of spiritual deadness towards the vibrancy of being fully alive? How do we navigate Kierkegaard's demanding terrain towards authentic existence? The foundational principle, emerging directly from his critique of detached objectivity, is his famous assertion: subjectivity is truth. This is not a claim for relativism, suggesting that any belief is as good as any other. Rather, it signifies that for truths that matter most for human existence, concerning meaning, value, faith, ethics, the way in which a truth is held is paramount. Truth is not merely something one knows intellectually. It is something one lives, embodies, and commits to with passion and inwardness. The how of belief, the intensity and sincerity of personal appropriation, takes precedence over the objective certainty of the what. An individual who passionately commits to an uncertain belief, risking everything for that conviction, stands closer to existential truth than someone who passively accepts a universally acknowledged doctrine without any personal investment or transformation. Consider concepts like love, justice, or religious faith. These cannot be definitively proven through empirical evidence or logical deduction alone. They demand a leap, a personal engagement, a passionate commitment that goes beyond mere intellectual assent. Living subjectively entails taking ownership of your interpretations, your values, your choices. It means acknowledging that no external authority, no scientific consensus, no social norm, no philosophical system can ultimately furnish the meaning for your singular existence. That meaning must be forged within the furnace of your own lived experience, through the choices you make and the commitments you uphold. It necessitates turning inward, cultivating self-awareness, and learning to heed the voice of your own conscience, your own passions, however muted they may seem amidst the clamor of the external world. This inward turn illuminates Kierkegaard's framework of the stages or spheres of existence: the aesthetic, the ethical, and the religious. These are not necessarily rigid developmental steps everyone must follow in sequence, but rather distinct orientations towards life, each possessing its own set of values and inherent limitations. We have already explored the aesthetic stage, defined by the pursuit of sensory pleasure, novelty, and the avoidance of binding commitments, ultimately culminating in boredom and despair. The painful recognition of this despair can serve as a catalyst, potentially prompting a transition to the next sphere, the ethical. The ethical stage marks a decisive move beyond the transient nature of the aesthetic. It involves choosing oneself in a more committed way, accepting responsibility, and aligning oneself with universal moral principles and social duties. The ethical individual recognizes the inadequacy of a life based solely on fleeting desires, and instead embraces structure, consistency, obligation, and the common good. Institutions like marriage, adherence to professional codes, and participation in civic life often exemplify the ethical sphere. Here, the individual transitions from dwelling primarily in possibility to living in actuality, making concrete choices that shape and define their identity. They accept limitations and derive meaning from fulfilling their responsibilities towards others and towards universal principles. This stage represents a significant advancement over the aesthetic, offering stability, purpose, and a more robust sense of self. However, Kierkegaard suggests that the ethical stage, while valuable and often necessary, might also prove insufficient for attaining the highest form of human existence. Living solely according to universal rules can sometimes stifle true individuality or fail to address the profound paradoxes and ambiguities of life. Situations may arise where established ethical duties conflict with a perceived higher, more personal calling, or where the universal ethical framework offers no clear guidance. Moreover, the ethical individual might still succumb to a different form of despair if their identity becomes entirely subsumed by their social roles and duties, causing them to lose touch with their unique inner self or their relationship with the transcendent. This potential insufficiency opens the door to the possibility of the religious stage. For Kierkegaard, the religious stage represents the apex of individual existence, yet it demands a radical, non-rational movement, the leap of faith. This isn't necessarily about conforming to organized religion or specific doctrines, although for Kierkegaard himself, it was profoundly anchored in his personal Christian faith. Existentially understood, the religious stage involves acknowledging the inherent limits of human reason and ethical frameworks, and making a passionate, subjective commitment to the absurd, the paradoxical, specifically to a direct, personal relationship with the absolute, with God. It requires embracing profound uncertainty and placing one's trust in something that transcends rational comprehension. The quintessential figure illustrating this stage is Abraham, commanded by God to sacrifice his beloved son, Isaac. This divine command shatters all conceivable ethical norms. From a purely ethical standpoint, Abraham's willingness is morally reprehensible. Yet, for Kierkegaard, Abraham exemplifies the knight of faith precisely because he performs a teleological suspension of the ethical. He sets aside universal moral law out of absolute personal faith in God, trusting in the absurd possibility that defies all expectation. The religious stage is characterized by this kind of individual, paradoxical relationship with the divine. A relationship that cannot be mediated by universal principles or fully grasped through reason alone. It demands ultimate passion, immense risk, and profound inwardness. It is here, in this direct subjective engagement with the absolute, that the individual realizes their highest potential and uniqueness, becoming truly themselves in the eyes of the ultimate reality. This leap of faith is inherently terrifying because it comes with no external guarantees, no logical proofs, no safety nets. It is a choice made in fear and trembling, sustained only by the intensity of subjective passion. Underpinning this entire existential journey, particularly the transitions between the stages, is the fundamental power and necessity of choice. Kierkegaard famously championed the idea that existence precedes essence. We are not born with a predetermined nature or purpose. Rather, we create ourselves. We become who we are, through the choices we make moment by moment. Life perpetually confronts us with crossroads, demanding that we choose a direction. Crucially, refusing to choose is itself a choice, typically one that leads back into the despair of the aesthetic stage or the anonymity of the crowd. Making a choice means committing to a path, accepting the limitations that come with it, and taking full responsibility for the consequences. It is through decisive choices, choosing the ethical over the purely aesthetic, choosing faith over reliance on reason alone, choosing actively to become oneself, that we shape our existence and move towards authenticity. This requires immense courage, the courage to face the uncertainty, the anxiety that inevitably accompanies freedom. Furthermore, choice must be imbued with passion and earnestness. Kierkegaard decried the growing prevalence of irony and detached intellectualism in his society, viewing them as sophisticated defense mechanisms used to avoid genuine engagement with the seriousness of life. To be fully alive necessitates caring deeply, investing oneself wholeheartedly in one's choices, beliefs, and relationships. It means experiencing life with intensity, embracing both the joys and the sorrows, rather than maintaining a safe, cynical distance. Passion provides the motive force for the leap of faith and the enduring strength for ethical commitment. Earnestness involves taking one's own existence and choices with ultimate seriousness, recognizing that how one lives has profound, perhaps eternal, significance. This does not equate to constant solemnity. Kierkegaard himself possessed a sharp wit, but rather to an underlying awareness that existence is not a trivial game. A pivotal element in this existential drama is anxiety, or angst. Kierkegaard carefully distinguished anxiety from ordinary fear. Fear typically has a concrete object. We fear the attacking dog, the upcoming presentation, the medical diagnosis. Anxiety, in contrast, lacks a specific object. Its object is nothingness itself, the vast expanse of possibility, the sheer fact of our freedom. Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom, the simultaneous awareness of our boundless potential, and the heavy burden of responsibility that comes with having to choose how to actualize that potential. It arises when we stand poised before the open horizon of our future, conscious that we can choose and that these choices will irrevocably shape who we become. While deeply unsettling, anxiety is not portrayed by Kierkegaard as merely pathological. It is an inescapable aspect of the human condition, an indicator that we are aware, however dimly, of our freedom and our potential for self-creation. The aesthete attempts to flee anxiety through constant distraction and novelty-seeking. The ethical individual seeks to manage and contain it through adherence to rules and duties. However, the individual striving towards the religious sphere must confront anxiety head-on, recognizing it as an essential catalyst for the leap of faith. Embracing anxiety, rather than suppressing or escaping it, is integral to becoming fully alive. It signifies that we are not merely predetermined cogs in a machine, but free, responsible beings grappling with the weight and wonder of our own existence. Kierkegaard sketched an ideal, though perhaps rarely fully realized, figure who embodies this highest stage of existence, the knight of faith. This figure is distinct from the knight of infinite resignation, who makes the movement of renouncing the finite world and its attachments in favor of the infinite. The knight of faith performs a more complex double movement. First, they make the infinite movement of resignation, placing their entire being and all worldly concerns in relation to the absolute, achieving a kind of spiritual detachment. But then, crucially, through the power of faith in the absurd, they receive the finite world back and live fully and joyfully within it. Outwardly, the knight of faith appears perfectly ordinary. They relish a good meal, love their family, engage wholeheartedly in their daily work and activities. There is nothing outwardly spectacular about them, yet inwardly they possess an extraordinary depth and resilience, sustained by their absolute, unwavering faith. They can live completely and joyfully in the finite, precisely because they have made the infinite leap and grounded their existence in something beyond the temporal. They embody the paradox of being fully immersed in the human condition, while simultaneously maintaining a direct, personal relationship with the transcendent, living with passion, commitment, and quiet joy in the everyday world, sustained by an unshakable, subjective trust. Finally, Kierkegaard did not shy away from the reality of suffering. In a culture increasingly oriented towards comfort, convenience, and the avoidance of pain, he reminds us that suffering is an inevitable dimension of human existence, and potentially a profound catalyst for spiritual growth. Suffering can shatter our comfortable illusions, force us to confront existential questions we might otherwise ignore, and propel us towards making difficult but necessary choices. The path towards becoming fully alive is not presented as a path towards perpetual happiness in the conventional sense, but rather as a quest for meaning, passion, and authenticity, a quest that may well involve significant struggle, heartbreak, and sacrifice, resisting the deadening pull of the crowd, choosing subjective truth over objective detachment, embracing passion and earnestness, confronting anxiety, making the leap of faith. This constitutes Kierkegaard's demanding prescription for becoming fully alive in a world that often seems spiritually inert. How might we translate these profound and challenging ideas into our lives today, navigating the complexities of the 21st century? The parallels between Kierkegaard's critique of 19th century society and our contemporary situation are striking, perhaps even amplified in our digital age. The crowd has evolved into the global, digital sphere, where anonymity often fuels hostility. Conformity is subtly enforced through likes, shares, and cancellations, and nuanced individual perspectives struggle to be heard above the noise. The pressure to curate an acceptable online persona, to follow fleeting trends, and to echo dominant narratives is immense. Kierkegaard's summons to individuality urges us towards courageous resistance. It means cultivating the strength to think critically and independently, even when our views are unpopular or inconvenient. It involves intentionally disconnecting from the constant stream of external stimuli and validation to reconnect with our own inner landscape of thoughts, feelings, and values. It demands choosing authenticity, with all its imperfections, over the polished performance demanded by the digital stage. How do we escape the gravitational pull of the aesthetic stage in an era saturated with consumerism and endless entertainment options? Kierkegaard points towards the ethical sphere, the act of making genuine commitments. This could manifest in committing deeply to a relationship, investing fully in a vocation or craft, dedicating oneself to a meaningful cause, actively participating in a local community, or consciously adhering to a chosen set of personal values. Commitment involves embracing limitation, accepting responsibility, and investing ourselves profoundly. Rather than perpetually skimming the surface of infinite possibilities, it means discovering joy, not merely in novelty and excitement, but in loyalty, perseverance, depth, and the satisfaction of sustained effort. It requires actively resisting the siren call of constant distraction and cultivating the capacity for focused attention, for being fully present with the task, the person, or the moment at hand. In a world awash in information but often lacking in wisdom, how do we cultivate subjective truth? It requires balancing the value of objective data and expert knowledge with the indispensable insights derived from personal experience, introspection, and intuition. It means posing the crucial Kierkegaardian question to ourselves: what truly matters to me? What ignites my passion? What principles am I willing to embody and defend, even if they defy easy empirical verification? This involves engaging with the humanities, art, literature, philosophy, history, perhaps religious or spiritual traditions, not just as academic subjects, but as vital resources for understanding the human condition and illuminating our own lives. It means learning to trust our conscience, our deepest felt convictions, and finding the courage to live in accordance with them. What about the pervasive experiences of anxiety and despair? Our contemporary culture often pathologizes these states, viewing them primarily as problems to be managed or eliminated, often through medication or therapy alone. Kierkegaard offers a complementary perspective. While fully acknowledging their painful reality, he invites us to see them also as potentially meaningful signals from our deeper selves. Anxiety highlights our freedom and the urgent need to make authentic choices. Despair indicates an alienation from our true potential, a failure to become the self we are called to be. Instead of merely seeking to numb or eradicate these feelings, perhaps we can learn to listen attentively to what they might be telling us. What crucial choices are we avoiding? What commitments are we failing to make? In what ways are we living inauthentically, betraying our own possibilities? Confronting these uncomfortable truths with courage and perhaps with support can be the necessary first step towards a more integrated and meaningful existence. Making the leap of faith in a predominantly secular and scientific world might seem archaic or irrelevant to many. However, we can interpret this concept more broadly than Kierkegaard's specific theological framework. The leap can represent any ultimate commitment made in the face of radical uncertainty, any embrace of meaning or value that transcends purely rational justification, or empirical proof. It could be the unwavering commitment to love another person despite the risks involved, the dedication to fighting for justice against overwhelming odds, the passionate pursuit of artistic creation without guarantee of success, the adoption of a spiritual path that requires trust beyond reason, or simply the resolute commitment to living authentically and meaningfully in defiance of the apparent absurdity and indifference of the universe. It signifies the recognition that a fully realized human life demands more than logic and evidence alone. It requires belief, trust, passion, and the courage to embrace paradox and uncertainty. Living according to Kierkegaard's vision is undeniably arduous. It pushes against the prevailing currents of modern culture. It calls for introspection in a world that celebrates extroversion, commitment in a society that prizes flexibility above all, passion in an age often characterized by irony and detachment, and faith, or ultimate commitment, in a climate that often worships empirical certainty. It necessitates swimming against the tide of the crowd, resisting the seductive comforts of the aesthetic life, and courageously embracing the often unsettling realities of freedom, responsibility, anxiety, and inevitable suffering. Kierkegaard offers no simple formulas, no five-step programs, no guarantees of conventional happiness. His path is one of continuous striving, perpetual choosing, and the ongoing, never fully completed task of becoming oneself. But the alternative, as he vividly portrayed, is arguably far bleaker, a life lived at half measure. Spiritual numbness, an existence dissolved into the anonymity of the crowd, a quiet despair masked by frantic activity and endless distraction. To be fully alive, in the Kierkegaardian sense, is to be radically engaged, fiercely passionate, deeply committed, and relentlessly authentic. It is to embrace the terrifying yet exhilarating task of forging one's unique individuality, taking responsibility for creating meaning in a world that often appears meaningless or hostile. It means living with subjective intensity, making choices that resonate with one's deepest core, and perhaps finding the courage for that personal leap into the unknown that ultimately defines a human life lived to its fullest potential. The world may frequently feel deadening, bombarding us with noise, urging conformity, and promoting superficiality. Yet, within each singular individual, Kierkegaard passionately believed, resides the innate capacity for a profound, vibrant, authentic existence. The challenge and the opportunity remains ours. Will we remain passive spectators lost in the crowd, drifting aimlessly on the currents of aesthetic distraction? Or will we dare to undertake the arduous, yet ultimately rewarding, journey of becoming the unique individuals we are capable of being, fully and vibrantly alive, even in the midst of a seemingly dead world? Thank you for watching this exploration of Søren Kierkegaard's enduring challenge to us all. I hope it has sparked some reflection on your own path towards a more authentic life. If you found value in this discussion, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more journeys into philosophy and the art of living. Until next time, strive to live passionately, choose courageously, and dare to embrace your unique self.